بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ بوأنا لإبراهيم مكان البيت ألا تشرك بي شيئا وطهر بيتي للطائفين والقائمين والركع السجود.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة لأهل التقوى واليقين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أما بعد، فقد قال الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: ولله على الناس حج البيت من استطاع إليه سبيلا. In the previous sessions, I covered the rules regarding the prohibitions of ihram. In this session, inshallah, I will explain the rules regarding Tawaf. But before explaining the rules and the conditions of Tawaf, I have to mention a few things regarding matters which are forbidden within the boundary of Haram. Of course, if you go to the holy city of Mecca, you will find that the city and the Haram has a boundary, and the boundary is known to the locals, and also it is made known to the pilgrims who travel to Mecca. And of course, there are signs on which it is written. For example, here the boundary of Mecca starts, or here the boundary of Mecca ends. And inshallah, if you go to Mecca, you will see those signs. Now, there are certain things which are forbidden for the locals, for the people living in Mecca, as well as those people who travel to Mecca to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. Now, the first thing is, of course, hunting. I did mention that hunting is forbidden for a person in the state of ihram, but it is also forbidden for a person who lives within the boundary of Haram or within the Haram. And it does not make any difference whether you are in the state of ihram or you are a local living there, working there, and you have a business there. You might be running a hotel there. So it is forbidden to hunt, and hunting is forbidden. Now, another thing which is forbidden is to uproot grass and to cut down trees. Cutting down trees and reaping grass or uprooting grass is forbidden. Okay, if you have some animals who walk on the grass and the grass is destroyed, there is no problem. But you cannot cut the grass and give it to the animals. If you cut down a tree or a branch of the tree, you have to give the penalty. And of course, the penalty is the price of that tree. If a branch of the tree is cut down, you have to give the price of that branch as kafar. But if you cut grass within the boundary of Haram, then there is no penalty for it. And another thing which is not permissible is to execute a criminal, a person whose guilt is proven, a person who is known to be a criminal. Of course, a criminal who has sought refuge inside haram, inside the boundary, or which is called the haram boundary, it is not permissible to arrest him or to execute any punishment on him. So penalizing a person who has sought refuge or who has taken refuge and shelter within the boundary of haram is forbidden, it is not permissible. But the believers are advised not to communicate with him and not to give him food and not to have any relationship with him, so that he is forced to come out of the boundary and surrender himself to the authority. So the mu'minin should not communicate with him, they should not feed him, and they should try to break away with him so that he is left with no option but to come out of the boundary and surrender himself. This is about people, about criminals who seek refuge inside haram. Now, another thing or another prohibition which is related to the boundary of haram is to pick up any lost property from there or within the haram. If a pilgrim finds a lost property within the haram, it has been highly discouraged to pick that lost thing. Okay, if a person has picked it and he has made the announcement, the necessary announcement for the specified period of time, of course, and if the owner does not turn up, then he can take the property for himself. He himself can use it. If he himself does not want to use that lost property, he can give it in charity to the needy, to the poor, and to the indigent. Of course, as I might have mentioned in the previous session, if the owner turns up, then he can take his property from the person who has given it as in charity to the poor. He has the right to do so, and if he does not consent to his property being given as charity, then he has the right to take it or its value from the person who has given it in charity to the needy. These are some of the prohibitions that are related to the boundary of Mecca. And as I mentioned, it does not make any difference whether a person is in the state of ihram or he is not in the state of ihram, or whether he is a local living in Mecca or he is a pilgrim coming from other places. He has to abide by this rule. Now, having arrived in Mecca, it is the next, of course, the next obligation after wearing the ihram garment is to perform Tawaf. And Tawaf is an important element, an important segment of the whole ritual, of the whole procedure. Tawaf is the second, of course, obligation that has to be performed by a pilgrim.
يا دافع الخطوب يا جابر المعطوف يا من هو مندوبي فعفوك مطلوبي يا دافع الخطوب يا جبير المعطوف يا من هو مندوبي فعفوك مطلوبي يا ستار العيوب يا غفار الذنوب يا ستار العيوب يا غفار الذنوب يا علام الغيوب يا كشاف الكروب. And it is highly recommended that a person who arrives in Mecca should take quick action to perform the Tawaf. He should not delay it, he should not postpone it in such a way that he is left with no time to perform it, because other rituals, other acts of Hajj will follow once he has performed the Tawaf of Umrah al-Tamattu. Let's assume that a pilgrim is going to perform Umrah al-Tamattu, because Umrah al-Tamattu is the first, comes before the Hajj al-Tamattu. First of all, you perform the Umrah of Tamattu, and then the Hajj al-Tamattu, which is called Hujjat al-Islam. Now, Umrah al-Tamattu and Hujjat al-Islam, or the Hajj, they are interrelated with each other, and they are not separable. First of all, you have to perform Umrah, and Umrah includes the Tawaf and Sa'i, and also the Tawaf prayer. And of course, once you have done the Sa'i, then you will have to, on the 9th or the 10th day, you have to move out to Arafah or to Arafat, and then start performing the main rituals of the Hajj al-Tamattu. Now, when it comes to performing Tawaf has to be performed as quickly as possible. And the thing which is necessary when it comes to Tawaf is ritual purity. One has to be pure from urine, from excrement, and from ritual impurity. A person in the state of Janaba, for example, or a woman in the state of Haiz cannot perform Tawaf. One who performs Tawaf must be in the state of ritual purity, in the state of ritual cleanness. He must have performed wudu, and if he or she had been in the state of, for example, Janaba, then before performing Tawaf, they should have performed the major ablution, which is called ghusl, and then, of course, the Tawaf can be performed. So the first condition, the second condition, let's say, because the first condition is niyyah. Of course, every religious act must be performed with niyyah. Niyyah is important, and that is presupposed. We presuppose it. Now, even if we do not presuppose it, you can call it the first condition. Niyyah is always the first condition. And once you have formed the niyyah, then of course ritual purity is the second condition. Purity from urine, from excrement, from any other kind of impurities. That is a must. And while performing Tawaf, if a person accidentally loses the ritual purity, then there are two suppositions. Either he loses the purity, for example, he passes wind before the completion of the 4th round of Tawaf, or after the 4th round of Tawaf. Because you know, as you might have heard from scholars, or you may have read it in the epistle of Islamic laws, that there are 7 rounds for Tawaf. And these 7 rounds have to be completed in succession, one after another. Now, if a person breaks his wuzu after the completion of the 4th round, he can stop the Tawaf, go and perform
make wudu and then come and start the tawaf from where he had ended. But if he breaks his wudu before or his ritual purity before the completion of the fourth round, then his tawaf is invalid and he has to go and perform wudu, perform the ablution, and then come and start the tawaf once again. And as it has been stated, if it is not possible for a pilgrim to make wudu, then he has to do tayammum. Of course, in the present time, there are facilities everywhere in Mecca, and there is no doubt that every pilgrim has the means and the capacity, and also the time and water and everything to perform wudu, and that cannot be a pretext. Of course, in the past time, maybe people in the previous time did not have access to sufficient water, and they had to perform tayammum in order to complete the tawaf. But in the present time, of course, there is sufficient water and sufficient facilities for pilgrims. So in the absence of water, a person, or when it is difficult to perform wudu, a person can do tayammum. And of course, if he cannot do tayammum, then his tawaf is invalid, because tawaf without ritual purity is void. Now, an important question arises about women who might suddenly start having their menstrual period. What about women who, while in the state of performing the tawaf, either before tawaf or in the middle of tawaf or maybe after tawaf, they have their menses. And menses is one of the problems women face while doing the Hajj rituals. Of course, if they have sufficient time to perform the tawaf, they have to wait until they have performed ghusl, and then they should do the tawaf. But if they are short of time and they cannot wait, and they have not come out of the menstrual period, then in this case, of course, they have to choose a representative, choose someone who will perform the tawaf on their behalf. Now that representative is sometimes called agent. He or she, of course, she has to find an agent who will perform the tawaf on her behalf, because the woman herself cannot do it, and she cannot enter the Masjid al-Haram because she is in the state of menses. She can actually ask someone or hire someone, an agent, to perform the tawaf on her behalf, and also to offer the prayers. Of course, if the agent does not offer the prayers, she can offer the prayers later when she is pure, when she has come out of the menstrual period, and when she is no longer menstruating.
ناجيتك يا رحمن ودعوتك يا ديان يا خالق الإنسان الله 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 يا خالق الإنسان الله الله الله.
Of course, in the present time, there are pills that women can take to stop the bleeding, and the problem is now solved. And this is permissible for women to use the pills, to take the pills for stopping the blood from coming out or from menstruation. And as far as the Islamic law is concerned, there is no problem, there is no objection to women taking that pill for such a purpose. Even if there is no purpose, even if a woman does not perform the Hajj ritual, it is permissible for her to take those pills in order to prevent, to stop from stop the blood from coming out, or stop the menstruation. If a woman enters the holy city of Mecca and she has enough time to perform Umratul Tamattu, and she deliberately postpones it, and then the blood starts coming out, in this case, of course, her Umrah becomes invalid because she has deliberately postponed the Umratul Tamattu, and she is guilty of postponing the Umrah. A woman who sees or who expects to be menstruating, or who considers it probable that she might start bleeding, she must take quick action to perform the Tawaf al-Nisa. Otherwise, she is considered guilty, and the deliberate postponement would make her Umratul Tamattu invalid. The Tawaf which a person performs has certain conditions, and these conditions have to be taken into consideration. Of course, I will mention those conditions one by one. The first one is that the person's body and clothes must be pure, must be clean. This is important. And of course, if a person is unaware of the najasa, of the impurity on his body or on his clothes, and he becomes aware after completing the tawaf, then his tawaf is valid. Lack of knowledge or ignorance is the justification. If a person is ignorant and knows nothing about the najasa, then even if he offers his prayers is valid, and if he performs tawaf, his tawaf is valid. But if he knows beforehand that his body is najis or his clothes is najis, then he cannot and he can never, of course, perform the tawaf, because tawaf in that case is invalid. And if a person forgets about the najasa on his body or clothes, and of course he remembers after completing the tawaf, the ulama and scholars have said that it is apparent that the tawaf is valid, but they are not, of course, telling it in straightforward that the tawaf is valid. They say that it is apparent, based on the apparent indications, the tawaf is valid. But they have said that as a matter of precaution, the person should perform and should repeat the tawaf once again. And one thing which is very important is circumcision for males. Circumcision is obligatory only for the Hajj. And it is wajib for a male, for a man, to get himself circumcised if he wants to perform Hajj, if he wants to perform Tawaf. Of course, circumcision is obligatory for Tawaf, and this is a must for Tawaf. It is not obligatory for prayer, it is not obligatory for fasting, it is not obligatory for any other religious acts. It is obligatory for Tawaf, and a person cannot perform Tawaf unless he has done the circumcision. Circumcision is a must. And if he is not circumcised, then he must circumcise himself, and he must do the circumcision, and then he can perform the tawaf. Otherwise, his tawaf is invalid. And of course, it's all very clear that covering the private parts is a must for men and women. And of course, as for women are concerned, they have to cover all parts of their body except their face and their hands up to the wrist. And as far as men is concerned, they have to cover the private parts and they cannot expose it, otherwise the tawaf would be invalid. Inshallah, I will carry on the discussion regarding tawaf and the remaining rules and the next session to come. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا ربنا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا ربنا يا ربنا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا ربنا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا